Welcome, welcome everyone to episode 25 of Owning Her Health. I am your host, Dr. Lisa Holland, welcoming you to this episode, welcoming you to fall, welcoming you into your sexuality this episode. So I have on today Irene Fair. I took a break, a little hiatus. Second week, I think, of August or so since our last Goddess Chats together. Thank you so much for catching up. Some of my new friends that have connected with me at Her Health Pod, the Twitter handle for this, or at YogaDocNC, or my Dr. Lisa Holland PT. We took 30 days. Go on over to at Dr. Lisa Holland PT for the Instagram every day. Last 31 days of August was just Goddess Wisdom 101 every single day. And in that time, I said, I got to practice what I preach, and I took some time, and lo and behold, no sooner, this is just my universe always doing her thing. As soon as I cleared that, I was able to be open to some great conversations, and in the interim met Irene Fair. She just kind of reached out, realized she was one of the guru goddesses as well. She's an intimacy and sexuality coach, advocate, adventurer, coach, and healer in all realms of love, sex, and relationships. Irene is on a mission, and I just think this is awesome, to help people have more love into their sex life and more sex into their love life. I love that line. She's known for authenticity, sharing her own personal experience, which she does share with us on this episode. So wonderful that someone could be vulnerable and so powerful at once. I'm so appreciative of that. And she really, welcomes you talking and conversing on her, sexually empowered woman. Irene gives permission to others to explore their authentic selves in uncharted territory, and we discuss that and how she works that, and how she went from corporate America work to hearing this calling through her own pain, flipping the pain, right? That's what we do. We flip the pain and become the CEO of our lives, and that's exactly what Irene Fair did. So this episode, in alignment with that kick-ass goddess fire, is welcoming you and is sponsored by Mind Body Brand Academy. And Mind Body Brand Academy is your 8 weeks to move from analysis paralysis into a platform or a program of your own. So to take all that monkey mind, all those ideas, figuring out who am I amongst all these people with the same letters after my name. If you're kind of contemplating and frustrated over that, this is your program. It's a one-to-one program right now that will soon move into a group program. But right now you can grab a couple of the last one-to-one experiences, all for less than $300. And it's mindbodybrandacademy.com. So go on out and go check out your goddess over there and get yourself into a brand and position and vision and voice that you love to share. So welcome everyone again to fall. I'm so excited to be back with you. We have some great episodes and conversations coming up. I'd love to hear your feedback, so make sure that if you look onto the show notes that you do comment on there. Go subscribe on iTunes, Owning Her Health, and share this with friends. Share this with other women. Share this with the conscious men in your life. Let them know the conversations that we're having. Thank you so much for your feedback. Let's start the fall season off right. Again, a second welcome here, and owning your health right now.
Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of Owning Her Health. I am your host, Dr. Lisa Holland, and we are here starting up again, getting back into the fall swing of things with a wonderful woman that, again, the power of technology and social media. I met over social media over on, I think it was Twitter, right? Her name is Irene Fair, and she actually is a sexuality, intimacy, and sexuality coach. So I am super excited to have her on for owning her health and talking in her unique way of her story, and also how she brings in her personal experience into her work, and how she's been able to actually make a living and make her work into this and help so many other women and men and partners in these relationships happen. So thank you so much, Irene, for being here. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and what you're doing?
Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to have this conversation and to bring the aspects of sexuality and intimacy into the space of health, which doesn't always happen still at this time, at this day and age. So thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So a little bit about me. I am, like you mentioned, I'm an intimacy and sexuality coach, and I specialize in helping people come together, come closer around some of the very common sexual issues that we hear about in long-term relationships: loss of desire, mismatch of desire between partners, often painful sex or discomfort during sex. And I say that, I love helping people have more love in their sex life and more sex in their love life. Oftentimes those two don't go together, and we feel like we're craving more of one or the other. And when they're together, that's where amazing sparks fly.
So true. So what brought you to that? I mean, what in your story, in you owning your own health and evolving your life, what brought you to that realization and able even to bring that into a business?
Well, it's funny because one of the reasons I got drawn to this podcast, Owning Her Health, was really because it was my path around sexuality. A decade ago, I was married, and I lost my desire. I was one of those women that sex was fun in the beginning, and then it got harder, it got painful, and I lost my desire. And I was incredibly alone and thought I was broken and thought that there was something wrong with me. And I went to a lot of different doctors, medical doctors. First, of course, I went to gynecologists. Everything checked out normal. I went to a number of specialists, from gastroenterologists to lung specialists, to make sure that there wasn't like a lump this big in me that was causing painful sex, or that was causing this issue that I was having. And everything checked out fine, but I knew something was off. I knew that something was missing, that I couldn't access a part of myself. I couldn't access this part of life, part of coupledom, part of life that was no longer available to me. But as I said, I felt so alone, and I had no one to turn to, and I just kind of spiraled down within myself. Like that was my path of just shutting down and thinking I was broken, and it was affecting my health. This wasn't a health issue that was actually creating a health issue.
Yeah.
It created depression and created anxiety and created very stubborn weight gain. It created a slew of other things, from mysterious allergic reactions to heartburn that had me stop driving one day because I had so much pain. And it was this not only repression of speaking about it and like what was going on for me, but it was also that I was punishing myself. I was beating myself up within, like there was something wrong with me. And my path of transformation happened. There was a moment I was at a women's workshop. I had discovered personal growth workshops and coaches, and I was at this workshop sitting on the floor crying because one of the coaches asked a powerful question, something about, what did I want out of life? And I had this realization, and it was incredibly powerful. I can imagine it as if it was yesterday, sitting on the floor and thinking, if I don't get access to this part of me that's already barely alive, it's going to die, and I'm going to die with it. I knew that this part was so important to me, and I knew that It was critical. It was like really critical for my health, well, for my mental health, for my physical health, that I access this part and that I'll use in quotes, fix this part of myself, because really I thought at that time that I needed to fix what was broken. But I knew very clearly if I didn't address this, I would die. There was very little left of me. And at that moment when I was able to admit to myself that this was so important, this was critical, I broke through resistance. I got the courage to reach out for support. And I went on a sexual growth journey, this very similar journey that I now take my clients on as a sex coach. And it was about really awakening and learning about myself and coming to meeting myself anew, like learning about myself, the parts of me that I didn't know or that started peeking out and then got all trampled up because of conditioning, because of fear, because of all these things. And that journey woke me up and it connected me to myself. And then also along the way, I realized, I think this is my calling. My journey led me to my calling. I went through this and I went through something that as many as 1/3 of all women go through. This disconnect from our bodies, disconnect from our desire, disconnect from our libido, wanting to want sex, but not knowing how to get to that place of wanting it, and feeling depressed and feeling anxious and beating ourselves up. And my eyes just opened up. It wasn't a conscious decision, oh, I want to do this. It wasn't because I sat with a coach thinking, what is my career change going to be? And I used to work in the corporate world doing marketing for more than a decade. It wasn't conscious. It was very much of just waking up one day and realizing this is it. I've been called. Wow. And and
that's
so
beautiful.
I love.
That's beautiful. And there's so much. I feel like you were a fly on my wall about an hour ago because I was recording another episode that was just every so often I'll do my own like goddess chat of just me talking. But I was talking about our identification as women with our core. And what that means to us, and that there's so many levels, physical, emotional, like it's I gave the example of that stick figure with that triangle. That's how you know that's the girls' room or the guys' room, and what that means to us. And I was talking about all of these things, like the depth of dysfunction in our core, whether it be stomach problems or pelvic, definitely pelvic and sexual, and that conflict of what we're supposed to feel and what this is supposed to experience and do. And I think to some extent, that's the journey we all have as humans, but definitely women going through those special sacred roles that I'm always speaking of the maiden, the mother, and the matriarch, and what that means to us. For some people, that everyone's a maiden. I mean, everyone, guy and gal, but how much you're kind of tied into that. But that fiery sort of go whatever thing, if that doesn't get resolved, and we go into mothering something, birthing a child or birthing a business, or, taking care of our fur babies or our partners or something, going into that role without that resolution, sometimes we can have that resentment and we can start seeing that come out in our physical body. I see so many women, not getting pregnant or getting pregnant and having problems with hormones, or, that the sexual dysfunction you're talking about, the pain where we start to hold it. And your story just speaks to that so much. And then how we get that wisdom. I feel like getting into the matriarch is that resolution of all that, whatever you want to call it, sacrifice or choice or whatever, so that we feel empowered with all this wisdom. And we can be 15 and have had a story, and have this matriarch wisdom at 15 or 55. And it just sounds like you have so much. So if you were to And thank you so much for sharing that, because that's vulnerability there. That's kind of, that's really scary. And then helping all of these women through it. But if you could say how that has influenced, that's obviously influenced your own health and your own wealth. You seem like, vibrant and are helping others with this right now. But what would you say in overcoming resistance? Is there any goddess wisdom was there any particular resistance you were feeling, even though you were getting all this information and really connecting to make that switch? I mean, you left corporate America, you left what you were knowing, you're doing this thing that people don't even understand how deep some of this stuff can be.
I love this question, because I am have been so intimate with resistance. Like, resistance and I were just best friends for a long time. And it's interesting. It's an interesting question, because I had such a transformation around resistance in general in these years that I've been doing work on myself, and then wanting to take these steps and then having to confront my own resistance. And I realized that most of my life I lived in a victim mode. Things were happening to me. I was at effect of the world. It's almost like I had this image of things were just flying at me and I was dodging them.
Yeah.
That's how I lived life. And I realized that resistance was my way of having some power in a very powerless situation. That was like the thing I could do. I didn't feel like I could be really in control of other things, but I could control my resistance. Yeah. I could just dig my heels in and say, and not follow my desire, not follow what I'm being called to do. And that's really what happened with the story that I mentioned of how I got into this work, is that between my marriage, when everything was happening in my marriage, and then when I sought help, there were 6 years. My marriage ended. And I sat there in resistance that, no, I'm not going to do this, magically thinking that, again, at effect, like something is going to fly at me.
Right. If something's going to just be different tomorrow.
Exactly. Like magically things are going to change. But I did not understand or realize how much power I had, and how much I could change things. And the decision to leave my corporate job and do the switch was one of the first major decisions that I made, where I chose not. I resisted for a while. It was scary, of course.
Yeah.
I was plunging into not only coaching, but coaching around sex. I had so much fear that I'm going to close the doors to all these other opportunities that are still open to coaches of other specialties.
Right.
You do career coaching, you can get a job in corporate. You do leadership coaching, of course you can get a job in corporate. You do sex coaching, it's like you close the door. Right. And there was, of course, a lot of fear, a lot of resistance. And the big shift was realizing and wanting to pursue this idea that I create my own life, that I shape my life, that I'm not just this powerless thing that things fly at. And that was key. And some of that came also in the experience I was having. I had already started coaching clients, and I noticed that when I was coaching and I saw them light up, and I saw them, their eyes open, their cheeks get brighter, and them coming awake, realizing that, oh wow, this is possible for me. Oh wow, I'm not broken. That nourished me and fed me. Like, I put 100% into my clients and I would get 125 back. Then I would put 100% of that back and I'll get 125% back. And at the end of the day, I felt nourished and I felt excited. And when I went back to my corporate job, right, Monday I came in with 100%. At the end of the day, I got back with 75. I put in 100% of 75. I got back 75% of that. And by the end of Friday, I didn't have much left. And I knew that this resistance wasn't serving me anymore. Like, that was very clear. and I made the leap, and it's been hard.
Yeah, it's not easy. I hear you. And one thing that you said about that filling, that getting back, so many women, the receiving end, being on the receive, even though, when you look at, right, with the plugs, they call it the female and the male, and that's the receiving. And then, and then for some reason, it's really hard for us. I think, that's a complexity with, what we need and what we think we need and what we think is strong and what the masculine form of what strength might be versus more of the graceful flow, curvier strength. I call that like the curvier hustle versus the linear hustle. They're just different. And I know one of the things you talk about, like you said, like the doors were going to close because there's these taboos where it's, there's just as many sexually dysfunctional people in corporate America, if not more, with their stress and the hijacking of their sex hormones than there is, in everyday, cul-de-sac communities. So that aspect of like pleasure is so taboo, and like receiving, that's one of those receiving problems with women, right? Is that something that you like really kind of delve into?
Yeah, we have such a receiving deficit. My goodness. Just, when I start working with clients, the first month or even two is about helping them get grounded and then start receiving, start filling up, because we cannot do this work from depletion, from, having a drop left in the cup. And absolutely, it is so taboo. It is so hard for us to receive. So hard to ask for what we need, because that somehow implies weakness, or that we are somehow dependent on other people. It's so hard to then receive, actually take in when someone gives it to you, when someone helps you or gives you something, or whether it's something or it's attention or love or hug or touch, or extra time in bed focused on you.
Right. And finding that voice to communicate that, because some people do get the negative back, right? Because if you're with a partner that is very, into that moment and that thing, and then it's like done, or leading into it, it becomes where it's like a selfish kind of, where you're giving again, but you're not really receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the aspect of surrender and that on both sides. I think, women have a hard time with, especially now where roles are kind of like chaotic in their head, what their role means, what success means in their life, what that looks like, again, in the more feminine style of it. And the fact that, we're talking about sex and sex being a part of health, and even like what you said, receiving it and wanting it, it feels like, that's, like maybe you grew up where that would be like a really bad thing to say, or you would feel dirty or bad in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
to some extent.
And wanting sex also has been presented as wanting sex to be with a man, to be with your partner. I think at least for me and so many of my clients, this wanting sex for yourself is such a foreign idea, because you want to have desire for your partner so that your partner sees that you want them. But there's also this other side of wanting it for you, wanting to receive, wanting someone to be with you and be on the receiving side. And this is the ultimate in getting and sitting with your own feminine. And moving through guilt and shame and fear of what that's like. And a lot of the times too is that there's the part of asking for what you want. Then there's also the part that you mentioned of partners sometimes not being able to meet you or not wanting to meet you. And then there comes a critical part too of then standing in your desire and your, I'll use this term, entitlement of desire. I'm entitled to pleasure. I'm entitled to time focused on me. I'm entitled to feeling good in my body. And standing in that and having crucial conversations, difficult conversations with our partners, in saying like, hey, this is not okay. And it's more than just asking for what you want. It's also that part of drawing boundaries of, hey, I can't do this if I cannot also receive and to fill up and
Right.
be on that side.
Yeah, that exchange. And again, we get into, and I'll feed back into. I definitely got much more of an appreciation of that in studying Eastern medicine stuff than Western medicine stuff, where it is much more mechanical in Western medicine and much more energetic in Eastern medicine. But that makes perfect sense in when in Ayurveda, when you're wanting to get pregnant, and even when they're matching you, if there was an arranged marriage, they're looking at you from a very totality of like just the foods you eat and where you spend your mindset and what you're doing with your time and how you're contributing to society and all of this. And I think we sometimes forget here in the West that that's important to us too. We just don't realize that's like pieces of, again, our intimacy with ourself, which I love that you're mentioning so much of, is like, that's what you need first. I mean, that's even what we need when I'm working with people with pain. And they're like, why are you getting into all of this? Like, like, how do you feel about, how you can't work anymore? Or, what is that doing to your relationship? Or, they don't understand. Can't you just fix my knee? Can't you just fix my, my back pain? And it's like, there is a chronicity. I tend to work with people after they've been to regular PT or yoga or, chiropractor or whatever. They kind of end up to me because I'm eclectic in that way, but we're there. We're at the place like, how has this really affected you as yourself? Because like you said, you can't even receive sometimes when you've closed yourself down and numbed yourself and sort of are becoming that mechanical. Let's fix all the pieces, like you said. Let's fix all the things. Let's look a certain way. Let's, go do this certain system. Even maybe getting to those, I see so many women in these retreats and things like that. Maybe there's another retreat or another book or something else that I'm not enough with that I can get from this. And you've shared so many valuable like lessons from your vulnerability, and I wonder if you were speaking to somebody, let's say, it's easy with us speaking woman to woman, but I see this as, I used to have a program, Guru Gal, and it's because I wanted to talk to them before they even get into, I used to talk to them as teens, and I realized, oh my God, I got to talk to them younger. And I was starting to talk to 8-year-olds on this body image and this, what would you say to that, like, inner child or that guru gal now, the Irene now, to that one that could have maybe saved her so much of that struggle?
Yeah, I love that question so much because I've been thinking a lot about how we can change how we talk to young girls. And so this question, I think back of like, what would I have wanted to hear at a younger age to prepare me for growing into my sexuality and into the intimacy with another partner today. And, I think we need to be asking our girls questions such as, what do you want? What do you like about your body? What feels good to you? We need to be asking these questions at a very young age so that the young girls, both, of course, within me, but also young girls all around us today, that they can start thinking from that perspective. What do I want? What feels good? What nourishes me? What doesn't feel good? What am I a no to? And plant those questions more than any other questions. We don't need to teach sex to young children, but we do need to start introducing these questions so that they get in touch with themselves, so that they start feeling, acknowledging, and prioritizing their bodies, their desires, so that later on they know what feels good. So then when they get into sex ed and sex education, it's more, they have a strong base of, oh, well, I wouldn't engage in that because it doesn't feel good to me. Rather than thinking like how, rather than thinking about it differently.
Yeah.
And so I definitely would have wanted to hear as a little girl those questions like, what's important to me, so that I got to think about that.
Yeah, that's so important. Like just feelings.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, again, the unresolved emotions tied to some of these same questions with the parents
Mm-hmm.
end up with the lack of communication with their kids, and that's generational. That might come from your parents, and then definitely from your culture, and their parents, and this and that. And as we become a much more connected global community, they say it time and time again, are we sort of losing, we're so looking outwards, are we losing that ability to sort of look within and see reflections? Because we're always looking for ourselves in that other person, in that other thing, in that permission slip from someone else. And how are you going to ask those questions, later on? How are you going to know? I mean, so many people, it even gets even deeper, because you're talking about like what feels good to you and what doesn't feel good to you. And I'm thinking, like, I would just love if some moms and dads, and definitely the moms, just like would be talking and just calling menstruation for what it is, and like your thing, or secretly, we're gonna get your stuff, or
The monthly thing.
yeah, like it's so many layers of like this. And then it just goes back to that kind of hierarchy of needs, that safety.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it gets down to, where can we just feel that safety early on to be sexual beings,
Mm-hmm. In our bodies, to feel the full range of emotions, because that's so tied to sexuality. Sexuality is expression. There's so much emotion in sexuality, and we're told not to cry, not to feel sad, not to a slew of things. And yeah, we start holding that back. We start cutting that piece of ourselves, and this one, and that, and this, and then what's left is just this numb.
Right. And I think it's hard to talk to our partners, because I'm seeing that I have a teen girl, I have a teen boy, and, the socialization. Yes, there's, porn on, social media and all of this stuff. But it's really like, how can I say what it is I need, or show someone what it is I need, when I don't even know what it is I need? Like, how can I expect my partner to know? And so we're ending up with a bunch of boys and other, anyone, partner, whatever, gender, sexuality, orientation, whoever your partner is, the other person may have never seen what you're talking about, because everybody's hiding everything. So, like, where are we supposed to learn this? It's getting into it. And I think, I want to get into a little bit of, you've made a program, right? You have a sexual growth program that I would assume touches on some of that. Tell us a little bit about that. How could that help us if we're listening to this and we're like, yeah.
Yeah, and this is a sexual growth program, and I use those terms very intentionally, because it is about learning, about growing and expanding ourselves. And most of us more or less learned how to have sex like when we meet someone, and we get it from movies, and it's kind of self-explanatory, and there's the aid of all of our hormones. Like, we get so turned on when we meet someone new, and sex is all, for most people, pretty easy at that time. It's learning then how to have sex in a long-term relationship. How do you keep the spark going? How do you keep it new and exciting and grow together with your partner? And that requires you growing, as well as growing the relationship. And so much of the work that I do with women and with couples and with men as well, individually, is around self-exploration, understanding yourself, understanding what you want. And most of us have never asked the simple question of, what do I want? That usually like stumps most people who come to work with me. And so we start exploring that. We work on exploring emotions and the body and sexuality and history. And in partnership, when I work with couples, it's about the two partners exploring each other. We think we know someone, but we really don't. It not only just theoretically, we don't know everything about the partner, but also we all change. Who we are yesterday is not who we are today. Biologically, physically, in every which way, we assume that we are. And so we approach each other thinking like, oh, I know what you want. It's going to be the same thing, or I know what I want.
Or it's what I want. Of course, it's what I want.
And so a lot of this is exploration. So couples really getting to know each other and asking powerful questions and exploring each other through touch, by slowing it down, by removing touch from sex and meaning from foreplay, from intercourse, and starting to get to know each other through touch. Like, what does my partner really feel like? And what does it feel like for me to be touched by my partner slowly? And what is it like to look in each other's eyes? All that, which gets lost also if you have children, if you have jobs, if you have traffic, if you have bills to pay, which is pretty much everyone. So we slow it down. We do a lot of exploration, and I teach a lot of skills around vulnerability, how to come forth and share your desire, how to come forth and ask your partner what you want, or stand in your truth in a place of conflict. As well as a lot of tools, like what I started saying in the beginning is grounding, learning how to be in yourself, how to not lose yourself when there is pressure of the relationship or just sheer excitement. Like you're with someone and you want to give, you want to do things. How do you stay connected to who you are and what you want so that you don't end up down the line regretting or resenting that you have lost a part of yourself?
And that's so great because, we have to admit sometimes we need a coach. I mean, sometimes you need a coach. You don't need necessarily, it's even like sometimes you don't necessarily need the therapy. Maybe the dysfunction that's been decided upon. If you've had a medical issue and that's been, taken care of, but literally coached back into your, what I'm hearing is like you're going to help them coach themselves back into themselves and then be able to share that intimately. And I think that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, Irene is sharing with this Goddess Tribe community a wonderful offer that'll be in the show notes. You want to tell us a little bit about that, or you want them surprised, or what?
I'd love to share. So I created a guide based on the journey that I've done and the journey that I take my clients on around reigniting their libido and reconnecting them to their partners. And I have 3 pillars of that approach, which is desire, pleasure, and truth. And we look at those areas, and they're really key in reconnecting us to ourselves and creating that nourishing connection with our sexual connection with our partners. And so I'm offering, it's a 25-page guide with exercises and perspectives on these 3 areas, desire, pleasure, and truth, and how they can bring you to reconnecting to your desire and creating nourishing sex life.
That is so generous of you. Thank you so much for that, Irene. And it's funny because the pelvic area in yoga, the second chakra, is sex, money, and power. And a lot of people don't realize same story. Same roots a lot there. And I think this episode is so valuable because you're showing, how could you be, we're talking about stability. We're talking about survival. We're talking about partnerships. It's the same thing, whether it's building a business, building a relationship, building your self-identity, and your sexuality. So I really, really appreciate you. And thank you so much for reaching out and noticing that you were a guru goddess, because you definitely are. And I definitely have all of that. So where can we find you on the web? Do you do local work? Do you do workshops? Or you have a website?
The best way to find me is on my website, which is irenefair.com. And I do mostly virtual work, so Skype or phone or Zoom, whichever is preferred way to connect over the internet. And then I also do some local workshops wherever I am traveling in the world. Right now I'm based in Colorado in the beautiful Rocky Mountains outside of Denver, and might be doing things here in the future.
Great. That's awesome. And I love that because that's one way we can own our health, right? Is like creating our wealth in a way that works in our life. And you just have, demonstrated that. So thank you so, so much for being on our Goddess Chat here. And like I said, everything will be in the show notes. So definitely download that guide and look at it. And if not for you, for your children. It is so important that we are taking ownership right now. Everybody's so worried I'm going to mess up my kids. Just learn what you can and share what you can. It doesn't mean it needs to be perfect and they'll adapt it. But I think that's such a wonderful, little tidbit you're talking about of what you would tell, your former self or your younger self. That's up to us. That's up to this generation with the voice right now. So thank you so much for that share. And this is another episode of Owning Her Health. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.